Looks like we've made it. We
Looks like
made it.
this is so I'm wearing this t-shirt today that says I am pastorless, are you? And the new streaming platform that we're using to do this LinkedIn Live, which is why we're 10 minutes late, doesn't support pastorless. And Ryan and I just had to be on a Zoom prior to reset my password for the streaming service. So if the people at Restream.io are listening to this, please, for the love of God, um, add pastorless to your platform because um, I'm sure we kept a bunch of people waiting. But thank you all for
Yeah.
being patient.
Yes, that is for any that is in our viewers or audience who did patiently wait. We definitely thank you for that. As well for those who are maybe watching us on a YouTube stream. For those who are over there, please like, subscribe, tell us if there's anything you'd like to see other than what content we are building or sharing here on a monthly basis. And I will second the advocacy of making Restream have passwordless on their roadmap. At least move to passkeys or something else. Let's just make this process go forward because that was a flashback, man. We live in this great life, dude. Like
Yeah.
our hyper bubble is so amazing that like when you leave that bubble, it's just so brutal. It's just so brutal.
Yeah, no passwords at Hyper. But let's get to the topic at hand, where we've kept people waiting long enough. We're going to talk about how to make sure that the IT person you just hired is in North Korea.
Yes, and I believe we need to have that view updated here on our screen. Waiting for a quick transition. There we
Okay,
go. Look at this.
perfect.
We had such great graphics that it's like, come on, we gotta get this up and showing. But definitely making sure that your IT hire isn't in North Korea is a very timely subject, I think, with at least the last 2 weeks. News headlines have obviously been out there. I know you and I have talked about it, Boyan.
Yeah, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, right, for the North Korean government. Um, it's like IT outsourcing, crypto, uh, fentanyl. I listened to some podcasts. I have no idea if this is true or not, but apparently, like North Korea, like per capita, is like one of the biggest like meth usage populations by by population. It's kind of
That
crazy,
that is a very interesting statistic. If that is true, we
yeah.
cannot confirm or deny
But
on
we
the.
don't know, right?
Uh,
We don't. I've never been. I'd love to go someday. Um, and recently, there's been quite a few news headlines around North Korean folks pretending to be American workers and well-paid ones, highly skilled ones, and them particularly getting access to the systems of North American companies. Sometimes they're just doing the work, right? And other times they're actually working to exfiltrate data and install malware and do more malicious things. But regardless, if you're a US-based company, chances are you can't work with companies on the OFAC list, and so that means no North Koreans and no Iranians, as well as a few others. So, yeah,
Definitely. And it's interesting too because I think I had made reference. There was a news article that had popped up in October of last year specifically on, hey, there's evidence of some employees being from North Korea within the IT world, and then we officially got a statement from the government saying, hey, be advised. This is happening, and then I think in the last 3 weeks, that's when we got this flood of information, as well as KnowBe4, which I have to give a lot of props and respect to for reporting. I mean, you and I were talking about it earlier. Like, this isn't something that is technically defined as a breach. So if you are a public company, you still don't even have to report it under the Section 105 at the 8K filings.
yeah, it's that's an interesting dynamic, and the Department of Justice report that came out was specifically talking about North Korea, but the reason that they got involved to begin with is because it is people in North Korea. right? But there are people doing this for companies in the United States, in Eastern Europe, Southeast Asia, Latin America, right? Anywhere where they can make more money. And so it's a pretty prevalent narrative these days around the person that is doing the job, that sometimes doesn't turn their camera on and all that type of stuff, is probably not the person that you hired. And that's becoming a common scenario, especially now that about 40% of people are working from remote or working remotely permanently, and that number is growing. Right? And so let's talk about who's who in the zoo for the North Korean incident in particular.
Yeah, I think it's I think this is actually kind of really a good topic because you were just kind of bringing it up, right? Like North Korea, we have a lot of public visibility because it was North Korea, but there is a whole other pattern of this that has been happening specifically after the pandemic, where we've had so much more remote work come up that it's not just North Korea. I think this, though, is very timely. I think this should shine some light on how big this issue truly is.
Yeah, so to talk about like who's involved in this whole thing and how this KnowBe4 and some of these other incidents went down. There's, several primary actors. One is the person who's least involved in this whole thing, which is just some guy or a gal who has gotten their identity stolen that happens to be a United States citizen, right? So hackers will steal their identity, get access to their basic information, social security number, driver's license, create a fake ID for them, and they'll essentially sometimes create a LinkedIn profile for that person that's fake, and they will pretend to be that person in an interview, and then that fake individual, who's had their identity stolen, will get a job at a U.S. based company, and when they say, "Hey, new employee at this U.S. based company, where should we ship your laptop?" They ship it to the next actor in the chain here, which is a U.S. based middle person, right? And I think in the DOJ investigation that was done, this person was in Nashville, right? And they just had a laptop farm at their residence or wherever they were, where these different laptops that were in their house connected to the internet were for different companies, and they, they're basically just sitting there on all the time, and during the workday, there's somebody from North Korea or China who is essentially remoted into that machine using, some remote viewing software or remote management software, and fixing bugs, committing code, installing malware, doing what they need to do.
Yeah, that farm, the picture of that farm was actually pretty insane because if I remember correctly, they were upside down, open laptops on a floor, just sprawled. I think they had like 7 or 8 or 12 of them. And it's very interesting too because they're talented IT professionals from North Korea. They function and do their jobs, right? The last part of that is probably where, and the reason why we have this being reported is because of where that money and funding was going to.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely in North Korea, reaping some financial benefits from that, and as you said earlier, part of the non-participating countries that we want to be contributing to.
Yeah, it's fascinating. They make a bunch of money off of this, and they use it to do all sorts of things. And the people who are doing the IT work are part of the government, right? Just like everything else is, and they're not probably seeing a measurable life improvement, right? And the North Korean government is usually working through intermediary banks in China or other countries to funnel the money through, and ultimately get the cash out. So this is a IT impersonation / fraud / money laundering scheme that is pretty interesting and just super fascinating.
I think it also goes to the concerns. Not necessarily what I say the concerns. Like every year we've been doing this in identity, and we talk about how there's identity theft, how identities are sitting on the dark web, and I remember even like 10 years ago, like a single identity was like getting down to dollar 50 if you wanted it, and that came with credit cards, that came with everything. Like the volume of identities that are already out there makes this so easy for that start, right? Um,
Have you ever been on that subreddit Overwork?
I sorry, I got a little advantageous and hit that little button there. I have not been on that subreddit of overworked.
Yeah, so there's this Overwork subreddit, and basically it's just people talking about how they are doing job stacking, right? Working 4 or 5 jobs. And one of the interesting ones that I saw recently was this guy who's like I think he's like a security guard at a prison or something. So he just sits there all day, has a very boring job watching the prisoners on the screens. And so he was talking about how he has 2 other jobs on his laptop while he's at his physical job, watching people on screens. And and how they're outsourcing some of those jobs to other people to actually work them. So there's people who are out there, making, you know, I don't know how much a prison guard makes, but I assume it's not hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they are making hundreds of thousands of dollars. So it is possible.
It is.
Yeah. Let's talk about the impact, though.
But yeah, I think this one carries. I like in that sense of severity. I think the impact here in this specific scenario has a little bit more weight to it, based off of the scenario. Look, the loss of productivity, we can always advocate that. I think in this scenario, the intellectual property part could also be of a big concern because of the security restrictions and the limitations in which, in essence, the world has tried to put on this country specifically.
Yeah, I mean, there's the business impact, right? I mean, if you have somebody working for you in North Korea, like you're out of compliance in some way, right? And probably many ways that you don't even know. So, that's obvious, and obviously this is a person who has access to your network, to your environment, who can do what they need to do to gather intelligence, move laterally, steal credentials, so on and so forth, and do other malicious things. And at the end of the day, for North Korea and some other countries who are on the OFAC list, like it's a non-trivial percentage of the proceeds here goes directly to nuclear weapons development potentially, and that's something that scares me, right? Living in a very densely populated area in North America, it's a terrifying prospect, and so it's something that we have to think about as a nation state also, around how it might impact us in the years and decades to come.
Definitely, I will go with that in the metropolitan area. I'm usually on the closer end when we get to that side. That's still has to go a long way, but in this specific one, I think this is the route it would take.
So some would argue that California, where you live, is already in such a state of decay that it's not even worth trying. But, let's. All right, I'm not gonna bash on California anymore. Sorry to anybody who lives in California.
Oh, it's a great joke, right? That is true. Some do say these things, and as long as everybody wants to run away, I'll stay. The other thing you were kind of bringing up, like the compliance, not the compliance side, but the security side, right? Like these are IT workers, and what do we do with our IT workers? We usually inherently trust them to have the skills, even if they're accessing a PAM system and getting credentials. Like in essence, this is an insider threat problem now. So like, I remember you and I were sitting back and discussing this, and man, the threat modeling and exercises and like all the hurdles we were just going through. Like this pivots quite a different routes when you have to threat model through on how you prevent and protect around this.
Yeah, there's a threat model of everybody being in the same office all the time and working, which is like this big, and then there's the threat model that's like giant the moment you let something like this go on. So let's talk about how businesses can actually prevent this. I think everybody understands it's a major issue, and they're going to need to figure out an answer.
Yeah, we definitely, not that we had the foresight, but obviously when we work with our enterprises, there was a reason why we started going down the path of what we're calling MFV today. But putting more verification up front of that identity. So as we put in that first bullet point here on the screen, which is a deeper identity verification check and risk assessments, it needs to actually not just be the one time. Obviously, we need to do, I think, a very strong linking in the very, very beginning, right? The link of that physical identity to the digital identity within the enterprise. But I think there's a secondary part to that, because I think we be like, oh, hey, we did it, we're good, and we would kind of hand off for the rest. I think there is that we're at that point now where there has to be reoccurring verification checks happening throughout, whether it's a time based, through behavior, through risk, and also if there's any, I think when we talk about like I'm adding a new device, or for some reason if you happen to be having to do password resets, not calling you out again, Restream, but maybe an identity verification in a password reset context as well.
Yeah, it's this is one of those situations where lots of companies have put in tremendous effort in recent years to roll out MFA, multi-factor authentication. But in this instance, you have a malicious insider who is purposely sharing a credential with somebody in North Korea, in this example, to access your system, right? So like what MFA does, and it's terrific and you have to have it, and we're going to talk about that more, is it verifies the account. It doesn't verify the person. If I've given my account access to someone else, that person is me if you're just doing MFA. So this is where multi-factor verification really has to come into play, and now we're going to talk about how the heck it actually works, and what we've seen work within organization. And so basically you would want to use multi-factor verification, Ryan, like you said, anytime anybody is resetting a credential, meaning they get a new phone, or they're being onboarded. Even during the interview process, we're starting to see multi-factor verification being used. And then obviously anytime that you sense any risk in the environment for a particular account, you want to make sure that it's the right person who needs to have access to that account, right? So the way that we typically work with companies to do multi-factor verification is we take the user through a configurable set of steps, right, depending on the level of access they have within an organization or our lack of familiarity with that individual. And that can include verifying their device, their location, obviously, can't be in North Korea, sorry, and their document, making sure that they're holding a legal document from a entity that we trust, like the DMV. I don't know how much you trust your DMV or have faith in them, but they make great documents. And then, if required, even a video chat with another human being who knows that person and can vouch for them. And then, doing this process whenever the necessity is there. And then, afterwards, they can reset their password, enroll into MFA, get access to the system, so on and so forth. And so we have an example, like handy dandy chart that we created of how this might look within an organization, right? Where how can you prevent this fraud using multi-factor authentication and multi-factor verification together? And so this can start even pre-employment during the interview process where, hey, this person that I'm talking to for this interview, are they in the right place? Do they have a valid device, phone number? Do they have a valid government document? And can I actually see them on camera before I interview them? And doing all this verification, having this audit trail is really important. And then bringing in that through the rest of the journey, Ryan.
Yeah, then the importance of apparently it's perfect timing. My camera decided to freeze. We're having all sorts of fun today, right? After the acceptance through the interview process, right? Having that one MFA, which we'll say MFA, honestly, I don't think there's any better solution than going with a passwordless or passkey type solution, because there's a level of assurance that you're going to have with that, and I think that is the bare minimum. Uh, but there is still behavior things that will manifest with users, and having some other behavior and risk signals detected. Maybe someone's origins is changing. Maybe somebody's work patterns are unfamiliar. You need to re-verify, and it might also be that we can get to the point where this is so efficient and fast that re-verification doesn't require another human to be involved. It's all automated, and it's just another checkpoint. Once again, we do need to kind of keep ourselves in alignment with NIST, and I think that almost every digital identity within an organization that is not a non-human identity, that's not a machine identity, should have some level of IAL association to it, and have that checked and reevaluated every time there's an authentication event that takes place. That's opinion. I think the future will be there.
Yep.
But that I think this is like this wave graph showing that, right, we're going to have these behaviors even throughout the life cycle. A year, 2 year, 3 years of employment, you still want to be re-verifying these individuals.
That's right. Yeah, and what we see is, you know, organizations today tend to verify a person's identity only when they first join the company, and that doesn't make any sense when everybody's remote, especially, right? So when people change roles, when they're trying to access a critical system at 2 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday, which, by the way, that they have access to, right? That they're qualified to operate, but maybe you just want to make sure that it's them at that time, right? And not somebody who has stolen their credential, or God forbid they've shared that credential with somebody nefarious. So it's about creating these different baseline for the different levels of privilege. Your lower privileged users will have a lower threshold of when they need to be re-verified, and higher privileged users will require to go through this process more.
I would even expand on the initial verification that you were kind of bringing up, like onboarding and hiring. That verification is usually not even in consideration to an identity or an IAM program, right? That's more at the HR level, which is, hey, here's your W-4s, here's your, are your legal documents, and then maybe there's a background check, and at what level does that background check truly go through? But at that point, it's kind of that trust system. Like, all right, HR says this is going to be the employee. At no point is there really a verification taking place as the credentials are being issued.
Yeah, the employee verification and onboarding process in most companies that I've seen and I talked to is the same today as it was in 2002, and that makes no sense. Like, Google was a 4-year-old company at that time, right? And so I think we have to evolve, we have to change, and I think some of these types of attacks that really became more popular since remote work became much more popular are forcing the conversation, which is good.
Yep. And I believe now we actually get to do a quick short video, so you can actually see what that process would be for a credential to be issued. This is obviously you're all falling victim to having to watch something I type, and I recorded here. I did do some extra security privacy things along the way, but in essence what we're doing is supplying something like my email address or an identifier user ID, as well as verifying with a text message, right? So the text message, we'll say it again, it's for spam mitigation. It's not necessarily a security posture, but more a just another signal in the evaluation. We also require you to type that in, so it is almost like a knowledge element, despite all things being a shared secret. And then we're also going to do a quick location check of that user, right? And once again, this becomes another signal. And right now, we're just getting confirmation. Somebody could say, hey, what if they don't put on the location services? That's fine. There's always a fallback to an IP address as well. But in this scenario, what we're going to do is we're going to keep this nice and streamlined. It's just going to go through a doc auth and verification of the document and a selfie. I successfully had my phone disconnect during the licensing scanning, so you don't get to see my ID. in a streamlined way. But in essence, we are going to do an official document and system lookup, right? So the DMV, as Boyan had brought up, how much you trust the DMV. There is value in actually being able to validate the information with those systems of record as well, because if somebody is using something like AI or something else to generate a fake ID and alter some information on that ID, this can easily be detected when you do and check with the system of record. And as you can see, this is going to go through and we'll complete the update. Hopefully this is still playing through. There we go.
It is, yep.
There's a lot of value in being able to do that, and also getting that to the point of the credential issuance, right? This is being bound. I now will have, in essence, an IAL level 2 identity associated to this specific authenticator that I'm going to get. And it looks like my screen has slowed on playing, so I'm not seeing the videos so well. Let's see if we can jump past that. There we go. Phone was broken. All right. As you can see, Alex and I had a meeting today. But in essence, the information is then verified, and I will simply have a credential issued. Now, I will repeat it again and again. That identity is now bound, right? Like, we now have an IAL association to a very high level associated, asserted authenticator. So the good combination there. It also didn't require another human in this situation, but as Boyan was saying earlier, having the flexibility to add a verification. Maybe my ID had a little suspicious characters to it, and that should just trigger an escalation to a live environment or a live human for additional verifications as well. It does look like we have something that has come up from a LinkedIn from a Jonathan.
Yeah, he asked, how are you balancing constant verification to enterprises while providing a good user experience to employees? So, different businesses will require different verification frequencies. For example, we are super draconian here at Hyper, and we require that everybody goes and re-verifies their entire identity every 2 weeks. And but we don't recommend that everybody does that. We just love using our own products. But for enterprises, this will be a reasonably infrequent process, right? When people get new devices, when they lose credentials, when they need to reset things that they would need to pick up the phone for and call somebody, they would go through a re-verification process. Or when we notice some pretty significant risky behavior, right? Like if they all of a sudden installed screen sharing software on their computer, you may want to ask them to re-verify their identity at that point, or if they're coming in from strange locations, so on and so forth. And the nice thing is this entire process is largely self-service, so people can do it from any browser on any device, assuming that they can provide the right signals in the data. So it's pretty easy.
And then we can even elaborate on that. Like, is it a managed device that they're authenticating from or not? That's pretty common in the enterprises today, whether it's Intune managed or Jamf managed or any of these other machines. If they're attempting to authenticate and all of a sudden now it's from an unmanaged device, that could definitely be a trigger as well. There's a plethora of signals in which could trigger this off, but I think, as you were describing, Boyan, the masses within the enterprise usually will not trigger a re-verification other than, say, a functional new device add or password resets.
Yep. What will happen a lot in October, which is in a few weeks, is the new iPhone will come out, and a bunch of corporate employees will go to the Apple store or their Verizon store, wherever they buy their iPhone. They'll buy the new one. They'll trade their old one in. They'll show up to work on Monday morning, and their MFA app will not be on their new phone. And they'll say, geez, I can't log into my work stuff. And many of those people will pick up that phone and call the IT service desk and say, I can't log in, I need my MFA set up. And most of those service desks will say, okay, what's the last 4 years social and the date that you started, or some other easy to figure out question. And they will give them a new credential. And that type of situation is ripe for attack. And that's what hackers are taking advantage of right now from a social engineering perspective.
Definitely. I think we've hit our actual logical closing point, though.
Yes, we have.
which is very strange because usually I like to keep this going longer and longer and longer because it's just fun. Um, I will say thank you for those who did stick around. Once again, if you're on YouTube, please like, subscribe. Also, any comments for maybe some topics that Boyan and I can take on that would be fun that we weren't even anticipating. If not, you're all stuck with the content we're going to build anyways. We have fun doing this either way. And then for those on LinkedIn, we obviously appreciate you being here in support of this as well. And we apologize once again for having a little late start today.
It's all Restream's fault. Thank you all.
All right. Have a wonderful one, everybody.
Bye.